Next presentation will be given by Jose Herrera Diestra.
So this work has been, well, it's an ongoing work. It's a very exciting work that I've been involved about for a couple of months now, and I wanted to share this with you today. Well, just to say that this setting is overwhelming in the sense that it's been a couple of years since I have given my first talk in person, and it's, yeah, interesting feelings. But okay, so my idea today is to, well, not to convince you, but to show you what's been happening in the city of Austin about mobility, and also what was the outcome of the COVID burden in the city, and it's more driven to understanding why this disproportionate burden of COVID has been happening in the city of Austin. So the general idea is to try first to understand or to recognize that whenever an emergent disease spreads in a population, we tend to take measures in order to prevent our contagion and to protect ourselves in order to not get infected. And also individually, locally, we do have a sense of vulnerability. We kind of know who in our home, in our local neighborhood, who might be more vulnerable to a particular disease, because we have that knowledge. However, generally in the more widened population sense, we do not have actually a precise definition of what vulnerability might be, but however, we do have we've been having for some years now some measure that introduces the sense of vulnerability to given populations, and this is the Social Vulnerability Index that has been was published some years ago, that identifies social vulnerability, or that refers to socioeconomic and demographic factors, the ones that are listed over there, in order to characterize how vulnerable might a population or a group of individuals be. How vulnerable would they be to, in this case, to a disaster, or for management disaster? Using that social vulnerability index that is published in the CDC, and we can see the city of Austin in general in the zip code tabulation area identified here. Yellow is less vulnerable, and going to blue is more vulnerable. And as you can see, there is a very heterogeneous setting of vulnerability. However, is very markedly separated in the west and the east. And this is something that is very interesting in the sense of social vulnerability index in the city of Austin. Now, with this idea of social vulnerability, and also with the mobility restrictions that occurred all over the country, and not all over the country, but in the world, we want to test, or we want to test this hypothesis that mobility restrictions actually affected differently various population groups, which is something that we already know in some sense, but we still need to understand in what directions these associations are between mobility and vulnerability, and how that affects the populations that move more or less, and with respect to not only COVID but other emergent diseases. So some previous approaches that have been, and of course this is not at all a complete and detailed summary of manuscripts. This is just 4 papers that have been published in some years, trying to address how to allocate vaccines in certain parts of the populations in order to minimize the burden of influenza in this case. Also addressing socioeconomic bias and influenza surveillance for the United States. not only for influenza, but also other diseases, that dengue in this case, that others in that, socioeconomic and also environmental factors affect the spreading of the diseases and also affect different vulnerable populations. And much more recently, we are aware, as the community of scientists that have been working in this problem for a while, that this is something that needs to be included in our models, that need to be included in our when we are trying to understand exactly how a disease may be spreading in a population. So this and many other manuscripts have been published addressing these questions, and well, this is the beginning of my contribution to how we can explain how mobility is related to burden of diseases in populations. So what we start with is, well, with mobile data, which I think that most of us are already aware of, which is the SafeGraph data. And in this particular case, we aggregated the data at the zip code tabulation area level in order to understand or to start answering the question of how individuals that were being tracked by the device with their cell phones moved between zip codes. So, well, in this case, that's what I'm going to refer when I'm talking with in zip code tabulation area. So we have information about the origin of the movement, the destination, the zip code of destination, also the number of visits between these two zip codes. And with all this data that we collected from 2018 to 2022, a couple of weeks ago, we identified three types of movements in this case. The first one is the inter-zip code movement, which refers to the movement of individuals between zip codes, that they have their home in one zip code, but they move for some reason to another zip code. The intra-zip code movement, which is just individuals that move around their same zip code, and also external visits, that individuals that move from outside the city of Austin to the city for some particular reasons. In this talk, I'm going to focus in inter-zip codes. Later, I'll be addressing the intra-zip codes and external visits, but for this talk, it's just the inter-zip codes that I'm going to refer to. And to evaluate how this mobility occurred in the city of Austin, now I'm going to actually reduce the zip codes that I'm going to work with, and I'm going to work with just the metropolitan Austin Round Rock area, which is conformed by 45 zip codes. This is the map of how vulnerability is distributed in the city, and we are going to measure the mobility ratio, which is just a fraction of the movement in 2020 in a particular day from zip code I to zip code J, and also from zip code J to that particular zip code I, compared with the movement that was occurring in the 2019, which we are going to consider as the baseline. Now, why the 2019? Because, well, I think that is because we consider 2019 as the last normal year that we had before COVID. Just to give you other things that we are going to measure here is, well, the plane of correlation between the plane of SVI, Social Vulnerability Index, and mobility ratio. We're going to measure how well they are correlated, also the slope of the best fit, and the measure of heterogeneity, which is going to be the Gini coefficient. Thank you. So this is the mobility in general for each zip codes in the city of Austin from 2019 to 2021. Then we calculate the mobility ratio, or the mobility ratio in this way. We take the window and align these two windows, the blue and the orange one, and calculate that fraction. This gives us the mobility ratio that you can see below. Now, again, each line is a particular zip code. The one means that one in the mobility ratio means that the zip codes move in exactly the same way above the one zip codes during in 2020 moved more than the baseline, and below that moved less than the baseline. So we can see clearly when the mobility restriction started, and exactly in March 19, that's where we had the mandate in the city of Austin. Now, to try to study this by stages, we divide our mobilities in 3 stages. The region, the green stage, the red stage, and also the yellow stage that is related to the hospitalizations of COVID in the city of Austin. And in this presentation, I'm going to show you what happened in particular moments or particular events in the city, referred to correlations between mobility ratio and social vulnerability index. As you can see, in the green stage, where we had no cases, or basically very, very few cases of COVID, and also before COVID, we have a very almost no correlation between mobility ratio and SVI, which are the green dots in the bottom. During the red stage, an increase in the number of hospitalizations, but also there was an increase in the correlation, a positive correlation between SVI and mobility ratio, meaning that more vulnerable populations were moving more than less vulnerable populations who were actually able to work remotely. The numbers are here. Again, it's increasing depending on the stage where we are. Very, very small slope for the best fit in the green stage, which increases when we go to the red stage, and also remains pretty high when we are in the yellow stage. Again, and also the Gini coefficient shows us here that there was a high heterogeneity in the movement, meaning that there were zip codes that were moving much more than other zip codes in the city of Austin. In general, then, considering the complete region, the green region and the red region and the yellow region, we can observe also that there was actually this increase of movement, or a more dominant movement from more vulnerable populations, which can be seen here in the red color in each of these plots in the panels. So the conclusions then in the end, during the mobility restrictions, so population decreased their movement. Actually, they did, but mobility restrictions affected differently groups in the populations. More vulnerable populations show less adherence for many, many reasons, which we could speculate or we could figure out in the future. And then, well, some extensions of the work that we are doing right now is a little bit more detail in the distance traveled, also not only where individuals travel, but why they did travel to this particular zip codes, which is going to be labeled with points of interest. They may be going to work, they may be going to the market, they may be going to, I don't know, to the movies. So these are the kind of things that we want to identify. Also, correlate this more generally with COVID burden, and also we are focusing in trying to make our ideas as general as possible in order to extrapolate this to other and more larger metropolitan areas. And with that, I also want to thank collaborators and also people who have been helping with this work, and thank you all.